For centuries, we saw the whale as a monster. Then it became a machine for making money. And now, it's a symbol we fight to protect. Our whole relationship with this incredible creature is really a mirror, isn't it? It reflects our own economic systems and their consequences. Okay, let's dive into this fascinating story: the whale, the machine, and the ghost of capitalism.
For most of history, our view of the whale was pretty much split right down the middle. On one side, you had the monster, the biblical Leviathan, this symbol of pure chaos that haunted myths and legends for centuries. But on the other side, it was a floating gold mine. Whale oil was literally the fuel that lit up the world. It was the petroleum before drilling, and that made the whale an unbelievably valuable commodity.
So, how did we get from a mythic beast to industrial fuel? Well, this first part is all about that journey, that huge shift from a creature we feared to a cornerstone of global commerce.
What's really wild is that this fear wasn't just some accident. Early map makers would deliberately draw these terrifying sea monsters on their maps. And it wasn't just superstition, it was a business tactic, a strategic tool. Think about it. If you knew the safe routes across the ocean, you could use the fear of sea monsters to scare your competitors away, protecting your trade secrets and keeping your monopoly. The whale was basically a gatekeeper.
But that all started to change, thanks to pioneers like the Basque whalers. They developed systematic ways of hunting, and just like that, they turned myth into material. The whale became the raw material of their world, a source of oil for lamps and bones for tools, totally bent to the needs of man. You could almost say it was the 18th century version of plastic.
And this transformation, it set the stage for something absolutely massive. The whaling industry didn't just hunt whales. It created a blueprint for modern global capitalism itself. This violent, worldwide system built on risk, sweat, and, well, a little bit of madness.
The scale of this boom was just staggering. Look at that number. Between 1816 and 1850, the American whaling industry grew by 1,400%. It became the fifth largest sector of the entire U.S. economy. This was no niche trade. It was a global economic powerhouse.
And at the very heart of this industry was the whaling ship itself. You gotta forget any romantic notions of sailing the high seas. A ship like the Pequod from Moby Dick was really an innovative industrial prototype. It was a floating factory processing raw materials right there on the ocean, and it was its own little microstate with its own laws, all designed to turn the vast ocean into a production line.
And this factory was powered by a truly globalized workforce. The harpooners on the Pequod, the guys doing the most critical, most dangerous work, they weren't white Anglo-Saxons. You had Tashtego, a Native American, Dagu, an African, and Queequeg, a Polynesian. This shows us so clearly that from its very start, American industrial capitalism relied on a diverse and, let's be honest, a highly exploitable global labor market.
So, how were these men paid? This is where it gets really insidious. They didn't earn a salary. Instead, the industry used what was called the lay system, where each man got a tiny fraction of the voyage's final profit. It might sound like a good deal, like some kind of entrepreneurial incentive, but in reality, it was a clever trick for transferring all the business risk directly on to the workers.
Okay, let's break this down. The captain might get a short lay, maybe 1/8 of the profits, with pretty low personal financial risk. But a common crewman, he'd get a long lay, sometimes as little as 1/250th. So after years of absolutely brutal work, and after they deducted the cost of supplies from his share, many sailors would end the voyage actually in debt to their employers. The system was designed from the ground up to concentrate wealth at the very top.
And it's this brutal system that Herman Melville just completely dissects in Moby Dick. He gives us Captain Ahab, a figure who becomes the perfect, almost monstrous embodiment of capitalism's most destructive impulses. See, Ahab isn't just a sailor. He's a product of the system who ends up rebelling against its very logic. He was hired to run a for-profit business, but as the source here says, he commandeered the vessel for ulterior motives. He hijacks a rational enterprise for a deeply irrational, personal vendetta.
And this creates the central conflict of the whole book. You've got Starbuck, the first mate, who represents rational, logical profit. His goal is simple: hunt as many whales as possible, maximize the return for everyone. And then you have Ahab, who is driven by pure, irrational vengeance. His goal is to hunt one specific whale, even if it destroys the ship, the crew, and the entire investment.
So, here's the crucial point.
Melville seems to be suggesting that Ahab's madness isn't just a personal flaw. It's actually an allegory for the hidden logic of capital itself, that relentless, irrational, all-consuming drive for absolute dominance, no matter what the cost is, that ultimately leads to self-annihilation. Ahab is the system taken to its logical, destructive end.
But just as the whaling industry hit its absolute peak, the world started to change. And with it, our entire perception of the whale shifted completely, moving from a symbol of conquest to one of conservation.
This timeline shows exactly how that happened. So in 1851, Melville publishes his famous critique. Just 8 years later, in 1859, the first petroleum well is drilled. All of a sudden, there's a cheap alternative to whale oil, and the economic incentive to hunt just starts to die. Fast forward to 1975, and the environmental movement leads to the Washington Convention, which finally starts regulating whaling. And today, the main whale-based industry is commercial whale watching.
What this all shows is a profound transformation. The whale stopped being just a commodity, an object of a hunt, and it became a subject of life. It became this incredible living being to be protected, a symbol of the natural world we were finally realizing we had to preserve. We literally traded our harpoons for cameras.
But the story doesn't end there, because even though we stopped hunting the whale for oil, the ghost of that original, extractive logic, well, it still haunts our modern world.
Today, the whale is no longer the center of our capitalism, but it's kind of become its ghost. It reminds us of a world that was built on brutal extraction. In art, we don't depict the hunt anymore. We listen to whale songs. We create these immersive experiences from the whale's perspective. It's become a memory of our own violence.
And this brings us to a truly devastating irony. Petroleum and early plastics were at first celebrated for saving the whales. They replaced whale oil and bone, which ended the economic need for the hunt. But today, that same plastic has become the new threat, choking our oceans and killing the very creatures it was supposed to have saved.
When you think about it, it's incredible. Against the full might of a global industrial machine designed to eradicate it for profit, the whale survived. It actually outlasted its predator.
Which leaves us with one final, haunting question. The whale proved it could survive us. But can our own system, the predator in this story, survive itself?